Hi, my name is Abu Francis. As you can see, I'm sitting in a car. I'm right now in the parking lot of PRC hospital. My parents have gone up into the hospital for some checkup. I'm very blessed to have such lovely parents, and they need a little bit of assistance. So once in a while, I come out of my nerdiness and drive them here and help them in whatever little way I can as a responsible son. So I'm taking this opportunity to talk to you and request you to help me, more than help me, help the project which I'm involved in, which is a unique design system which I've invented and I've been nurturing for the last 30 plus years. My name is Abu Francis. I'm an architect, I'm a researcher, and I'm also a software developer. And many years back, 1987, I started my practice when I was 25 and a half. And I got involved in trying to understand how I can contribute into this field of mine as an architect. So here is a design system which emerged from the messiness of an architectural office from India. My practice is in Navi Mumbai, which is those days was the largest city in the world, which was coming up really furiously. Every third enterprise there was an architect's office or a civil engineer's office or a builder and so on and so forth. And it was all marshland over there. I got malaria 10 times. So it's a pretty interesting story. So in those marshes, one lotus emerged, which is the way I look at it. Of course, I'm a biased person, which is what TAD is about. TAD stands for the Architect's Desktop, which is the name of this design system which I invented. And I've been trying to promote this pretty earnestly amongst architects and even non-architects who are interested in the built environment. So I thought that I should really finally very earnestly and directly ask you for some support, as much as you can give for this project. It is not really for me. I think a developing country like India needs to really go deep into what is the built environment all about, and how do we really go about nurturing it in a manner that it comes out reasonably right. For one of the things about the built environment is that some of our works would be lasting for centuries, sometimes at least for 20-30 years. And in those 20-30 years, it has already contributed whatever it sometimes without even knowing that it is contributing to global issues like global climate change and carbon footprint and energy usage. All that you must have read, that architecture does contribute a big part in all this. When I looked at it, I was looking at it in 87 when I started my practice, and I just come fresh out of another practice, which is that of Hafiz Contractor. He's today one of the leading architects in India and quite well known even abroad. His office is more than 300 people, if I remember right now, but those days we were just 8. And he's a bunch of really interesting and intelligent and hardworking people. We are very hardworking, very earnest. But what was dramatized, what came in front of me, is that the final end product had a lot of flaws. So that was one of the reasons why I started thinking in 87, saying, where does this beast, how do you control this beast called the architectural design process? Because a design process will lead to the final product which is there. And once that product is out there, I mean, all the bets are off, right? You can't do anything about it. It's going to be there for the next 20 years, 30 years, sometimes centuries. You can't stand in front of a building with a magic remote and say, I don't want this architectural experience. Press another button, I want another experience which I want to now participate in. It's not possible. So whatever criticism you do after the end of it, if you don't have any valid understanding of what happened to reach there, it is quite pointless, right? So I started talking about information in architecture right from very early stages of design. And today they say that they're talking about information in buildings using BIM, but the BIM talks about the B part, that is the building. It's assuming that the building is already kind of conceptualized already. Now let's figure out how to handle the information, but then that is too late. So I instead talk about AIM, architectural information modeling, where you have to talk about nurturing this design process right from very early stages onwards and then reach the final building. So the approach taken in TAD, did I say it stands for the architect's desktop? It should be an environment where you have the entire desktop of all the issues which an architect faces inside that software. I'm not yet reached there, but it is going there in that direction. So I need to take and nurture design right from very early stages and bring it and then figure out that this is the design which we want to do. And it is a lot more complex than that. You can't follow along a narrow path of one concept which you come with the design. You have to explore multiple different alternatives and then choose which is the one which is most appropriate, which needs to be placed over there. So this is the approach. These are the concerns which drove me to invent a completely different system. I did not know it was different because this started way back in 87, as I told you, and by the time 88 and 89 arrived, I had conceptualized some pretty interesting bit of mathematics in architecture, and this software was written around that mathematical way of representing buildings. So that is a system which actually can talk about designs right from the very early stages, and it can talk about it very tersely. It can talk about buildings in kilobytes. Actually, you can go and take a look at it at www.teamtad.com, and you will find for yourself, if you load all the sample files, these are very tiny files, and yet it has a lot of richness in data. And the reason is that the way I approach this problem of how to nurture and manage the design process and how do you represent the issues of design was looked upon in a very different way, not just from the point of view of geometry as it's traditionally seen in computer graphics. So there's a lot I can talk about it technically, but here I don't want to spend so much time saying that. It's very important that a developing country like India needs to really look into this, and this actually affects every country in some form or the other, especially developing countries. So the focus of TAD is in developing countries. The focus of TAD is for architects of small and medium-sized architects offices, and it is actually meant for the senior architects in these offices. It's not meant for draftsmen. It's not meant for very junior architects. It's not meant for fresh architects. They're all welcome to use it. Even non-architects are welcome to use it. But the main thrust is to have a simple system which allows an architect to talk about the representation of the design in a linguistically clear manner, so that all the problems can be addressed during the design stages rather than at the final stage of design where things are already frozen and you can't do much about it. So I really don't want to call it a BIM system. I used to call it a BIM system for want of a terminology, but I think AIM is a better terminology than BIM, and that's what I am planning to call this system. And there's a group of people now talking about what goes into AIM, architecture information modeling. In fact, BIM is a subset of AIM. So that's another part of the story. Let me just give you two dramatic examples which really should highlight the need for architects to understand why they should represent their model in a linguistically clear manner. Because many people are wondering, like, I'm an architect, I've did my job, I made my building, and my building will talk for itself. Yes, but unfortunately, that building has got so much amount of knowledge of yours locked up there. We have to reverse engineer and figure out what went through in your mind for us to know what you've been doing in that building. And that's not sufficient. That's not fair for others to know what is going on. You can't take a cooked dish and then figure out how was this dish created and what were the other issues which was there for that cook to create that dish, which he had to go through and he managed to overcome, and then finally here's the dish. I mean, it's crazy. They will give you the recipe, right? Then you can sit down and hopefully recreate that dish. It's a very simple analogy. It does break in some situations. Architecture is a lot more complex than a cooked dish. But broadly, that's what's happening, that we cannot keep the design process in the dark and claim that we came up with the design and here it is, and then here is that final building and here are my BIM models. So let me give you two examples which dramatize this. One is this COVID crisis itself. How is COVID spread? It is spread through these viruses traveling through spaces and entering our nostrils and whatnot, and then we get infected, right? These viruses are not traveling through like termites through some built matter. Now, where is the data about these spaces? The data about the spaces are with architects. Architects are the one who modulated the built environment, shaped the walls in such a way that there is an interconnection of spaces from one area to the other. You go from one area to the other. So what should have happened is that architects should have opened out their data and say, okay, let's pour over the data which we already have about these spaces and let's form certain theories on how this COVID viruses may be traveling over there. And then go and check in the real world whether are those theories right or wrong. But frankly, when I talk about this to other architects, they get overwhelmed. They're wondering what the hell is wrong with me, and how is architecture got to do with COVID? Yes, architecture is very much got to do with COVID. We should have been at the leading edge to supply the data for people to theorize where all things are happening with this virus. But there's nothing. The so-called BIM group who says that we can model the entire BIM and all that and the whole building information modeling, they're sitting on mountains of data, gigabytes of data, petabytes of data. How much of that got opened up to really analyze how this virus may be traveling? None. That means there is something fundamentally wrong in the way we have gone about modeling our buildings, our designs. So that needs to really be a wake-up call for us, for the entire community. This problem of representation of architecture right from early stages and how it has to be put linguistically clear is a huge subject, but it is very rarely discussed or debated. I happened to get into that and I came up with this fractal representation system, and that is at the core of what TAD does. And that's why it has certain relevance and importance in society today. The second example which I want to give was a lot more personal, which happened about 3 years back. I was invited to be part of a team of architects and researchers and doctors to investigate a horrifying medical situation happening right now in Bombay in India. Mumbai, as you may know, is probably one of the largest metropolises in the entire world. It's a huge city, and the poor people nowadays have been given what they call as SRA buildings, Slum Rehabilitation Authority. And these authorities, they sanctioned the removal of all those hutments, and instead they allowed creation of this 20-25 story skyscrapers over there with relaxed municipal local guidelines and bylaws. So they said that, okay, they are poor people, they don't need that kind of space, so they can have much narrower corridors, they don't need that great lifts, all kinds of weird things. The buildings are so closely spaced that there's hardly any sunlight reaching the bottom part of these skyscrapers. So these buildings nowadays have become a hotbed for drug-resistant tuberculosis. It's crazy. Like, because the people there are still poor. Just because they're in high-rise building doesn't mean that they suddenly become rich. And what do we have here is that the amount of cases emerging in these hotspots are so large that it will finally spill over to the entire city, and it will be a very, very bad crisis. It's already happening. I know one friend of mine who's quite wealthy, who happened to be staying somewhere near that such complexes, and he's got tuberculosis. So when I got brought into that particular research group, I was horrified at the way we were going about trying to form some theories. We were actually standing inside those buildings trying to figure out what could have gone wrong, and we are literally clutching at straws to figure out what the theories could be to why this particular tuberculosis is spreading like this. And that's crazy. That's totally unscientific. You have to have prior data. You have to sit at the model level and then create theories and then go and form hypotheses which can later on be verified out in the real world. But here we are, we don't have enough drawings. We have just pictorial representation, which are the drawings, but we have no spatial understanding in those drawings, because those drawings are talking about the built matter and nothing much more. So you have to actually form your own ideas about how that particular congestion is leading to this, and that's crazy. So once again, I was dumbstruck by the primitiveness of the way we go about talking about knowledge in architecture. We have a lot of drawings, and these drawings are legacies come from the times of the Renaissance. That's more than 600 years back. And we have not debated this. We have not argued this. As architects, we have not done anything. So last 30 years, I've been earnestly trying to offer a different way of solving this particular issue of modeling architecture right from early stages. And frankly, I've become an old man now. I didn't realize that it is going to take so many years with all kinds of debates and workshops and seminars and whatnot, and papers published in conferences and journals, and 2 research projects with IIT Bombay. I did that. I did everything. There are no real contradictions in what I'm talking about. It really deserves to be supported. I hope you will do that, and I will, when I later on edit this video, I'll give you the links on how you can support this project. Thank you very much for listening. Take care and Happy New Year.